So what is the Reddit sexual ethic? Or really, what is the general sexual ethic of the Western world in the year of our Lord 2023? It is that two consenting adults can do whatever they like. That's it. The reason why other people aren't involved is because there are disputes over the ability to consent. Now, this is an extremely dangerous rule, this consent rule, because as I think people kind of know intuitively, sex is an extremely powerful thing. And when it's unleashed, it can cause serious problems not only for the person objectively, but also for the society around them. So let's raise to mind an example. I'm sure that many of us who went to public secondary schools, or to grammar schools, or to comprehensive schools, wherever you are from, will recall that often men and women would fight over each other. There would often be a situation where one girl would be desired by two men, or one guy would be desired by two women. And if this were truly a mature love, then one of the women would be able to let go, or one of the guys would be able to let go. But it wasn't. It was a mixture of lust and social standing. Another one, there would be the town bike, to use a kind of an unpleasant description, but a kind of a woman who would just sleep with everybody. And she often had problems in her own life that made her do that. But the fact that there were men lining up to do that was partially as a result of a rather badly placed desire to lose their virginity, and also out of lust, a sexual desire, which controlled them and made them do this. And so we see in teenagers the presence of this force, which in the moral literature is called lust. And this is the disordered desire for sexual pleasure. Now, what is a disordered desire? Because clearly there is some agreement from Redditors that there is such a thing as a disordered desire. I mean, it's present in that definition of consent that we gave earlier on. But in reality, the extension of this goes far, far further. We have to recall that engaging in sexual acts purely for the sake of their pleasure destroys a person's psyche because of the power of that particular action. I recall hearing from a friend of mine about a little German girl who was about 13, and as teenagers typically do, she lost her virginity at 13 on a park bench, and she was never the same after that. I'm sure that many people can recall the mental issues that many of these women who were unfortunately subjected to that at a very early age went through. And this enables me to bring up the observations about the consequences of sexual sins that were observed by people in the Middle Ages and down the centuries. Because, in case we forget, these people were not stupid. They were decidedly not stupid. In fact, the particular theologian that I'm going to talk about now, St. Thomas Aquinas, could pop Michio Kaku like a little spot. He's a genius. And you can go and read his writings and you can ascertain this. Now, he goes through a number of different consequences for sexual sin. That is to say, sexual disorder according to an ordered conception of morality. And one of these is despair. The woman who engaged in this action was likely despairing. Not only because there's a sense that this is a very wrong thing to engage in, but also because it destroys hopes and dreams about romantic futures and things like this. But principally because it destroys the hope in the life to come. Because people know, intuitively, that it is wrong. There is a reason why dirtiness is constantly invoked in these particular circles. The second thing, and this also comes with the dirtiness I've just described, is pride. There is a certain pride in people that sleep around and engage in a lot of sexual activity. They think that they are better than the people around them, when really they're not. They're just a puddle of effeminacy that keeps falling into their own particular sexual desires and can't free themselves. Because that's exactly what people like this are. They are constantly addicted, and they think that they're winning by doing so. But they're not. It's pride. And with the pride, and also with the unbalance that the sexual act incurs, is also a clouding of the mind. It destroys a person's ability to reason. I don't know if anybody's noticed this, But when I was at university, there used to be a process that women who went to the university would often go through, and I certainly noticed this in people I used to go to school with. It was called I'm trying to think of that was it Senator Palpatinification, right? So women would come in looking very healthy. They would come in, very good skin, decent morals, relatively fine. And then over time, they'd slowly begin to sag. And they'd slowly begin to become depressed and brought into unhealthy manners of being. And they'd also become stupider. In fact, this is often something that's mentioned in conservative circles, right? That universities tend to make people stupider for some reason. And my contention would be is not that they're actually going to the lectures and listening to the professors that are talking. I don't think that even I did that. I didn't do that myself. I just got my degree and did what they needed me to do. But I would contend that the life of drinking and sex and drugs is what is doing this to them. It makes them stupider. Another thing as well is that all of this lust, it's all included in masturbation as well, so you're going to see the same effects if you masturbate. Another thing that this does is it incurs a kind of mollification. Now, in Latin, the term for masturbation is mollitias, which is effeminacy. So it's a weakening. When we talk of effeminacy, we don't mean that some man has become akin to a woman, but more that a man has become weak and unable to stick at things and inconstant. This is something that emerges out of lust as well. And so we have the situation where we have a sexual ethic that essentially leads to people who are lazy, who are stupid, and who are arrogant. And so therefore they cannot function properly. And this means that we end up with a society of fundamentally weak people. And so therefore we see this impact political situations. For example, can you imagine a government in the West banning adultery? Can you just imagine this? People would be up in arms. Because it would go against this rule in theory, but in practice it would also get in the way of their private lives. And we can't have that. Can you imagine if they banned masturbating? This just wouldn't happen. And this is an exact social and political consequence of this lust. If people were not addicted to masturbation, if they were not addicted to fornicating, then we wouldn't have a situation where these things would seem so laughable, because the rational mind would take over, observe the serious social consequences of these things on top of the inherent consequences we've just talked about, and they would begin to move in on it. Now, I've talked a lot about the personal consequences of sexual misbehaviour, but what about the social ones? Well, of course, we see it nowadays. Constantly, parents abandoning their children to pursue their dreams. Nonsense and disgusting things like this. We also see in some places that disgusting foul stench that is polyamory. That idea that we can somehow share other people as if this most intimate action that's supposed to bind together man and woman was something just willy-nilly. And don't pretend as if this isn't evil. Go and scroll through the r/polyamory subreddit and see how many people are unhappy with it. If even people in such darkness can perceive the evils that result from this, then what excuse do you have, viewer? What excuse do you have to support such a thing? We cannot simply have this be simply consenting adults. We also see, as I've hinted at earlier on, this anger at the church because the church will correctly point out that this is disordered behaviour. That this kind of behaviour is something that destroys civilizations. That is why people really rage against the church. They don't really care so much about the particular logical truth about the beliefs held within them. They care because the church stands in the way of them gratifying themselves. And that's why they rebel. And so we see now, just from these few examples, family breakdown, polyamory, and the attack of the church, the profound social influence that disordered sexual behaviour can result in. This is not some piddling little funny thing, even if you're so addicted you can't see the seriousness of it. It is something that needs to be treated with seriousness. And so therefore, stop it. Stop masturbating. I made a video on it. Stop fornicating. Stop doing all of this disordered stuff. You also give power to men like Andrew Tate, people who run these camgirl stations. You provide for the exploitation of thousands upon thousands of women. You have provided a market for such women. And this is only because you couldn't keep your penis in your pants, if you're a bloke. And if you're a woman, well, you know. And so, I would also very strongly attack the sexual ethic of the Redditor. And this is the entirety of the video. If you're interested in more content, please put money on the Patreon. If you're interested in Latin, I also give out Latin readers through the Patreon. And if not, please like, subscribe, and particularly share so people can engage with my work and so that my channel can grow. Thank you very much for watching.